Hey everybody, let's talk about these new computers that they're selling nowadays at like Best Buy and places like that. These all-in-one computer systems. See, back in the day, well still now, but they've always had the typical design of the desktop PC. You had your display or monitor and your tower. But nowadays it seems like the manufacturers are wanting to go to all-in-one systems. The tower and the monitor are now in one unit that sits on top of your desk. Is it a really good idea? I mean, it does give you a little bit extra space where that tower normally is set, but let's talk about something that you really should know when you decide to buy one of these computers. Let's say an HP TouchSmart, let's say any computer system that looks like a HDTV that sits on top of your computer desk. Here's one thing that many customers I'll think about when they go to buy these machines is when something goes wrong, how bad is it going to be to repair it? Now see, computer experts like me know that regular desktop towers have a special format called ATX. The motherboard goes by ATX standards, the power supply goes by ATX standards, and the case goes by ATX standards. And the majority of computer manufacturers that make these towers, at least the regular size towers, that sit on top of your desk that about, I'd say, about this long and this tall, if you can see, let me do sideways here, about this tall, those are micro ATX mini towers. And of course, if your motherboard fails or your power supply fails, for that matter, you can replace the power supply or motherboard very easily with a retail power supply from, let's say, Best Buy or Newegg.com or a local computer shop. That's simple. But when you start talking about these all-in-one computer systems, these machines are proprietary. So the manufacturer can design them however they want and charge whatever they want for the replacement motherboard power supply. So that's the bad thing. I mean, you can still replace your CPU. In some cases, your CPU, you may be limited by what you can install in terms of the CPU in an all-in-one machine, but you can usually upgrade your memory or your hard drive fairly easily, because of course they buy the hard drives from a third-party manufacturer that makes like a standard 3.5-inch hard drive, and of course DDR3 memory. Now go install into these machines. So when you start talking about these proprietary designs, you start talking about expensive repairs if something goes wrong. Usually when the motherboard fails in an all-in-one machine, you got to send it back to the manufacturer, and that's going to cost you. Now, many of you may say, let's get an extended warranty. That'll cover the problem. Well, here's my opinion on extended warranty. There's usually a catch somewhere. You've got to be careful. There's usually a catch somewhere. I'll explain why in a minute. You just got to be very careful about these extended warranties. But still, I mean, the fact is, if your all-in-one PC fails, of course, you got to send it out somewhere, so you'll be without a computer for a little while unless you have an extra computer as a spare. That's not good news either. So we're already talking about a machine that can be upgraded that easily. You can only upgrade the CPU, the RAM, or the hard drive, but you can't replace your motherboard. And of course you can't install a graphics card in the thing. Usually you can't. Maybe there's some out there you might be able to, but I doubt it. Because I mean, for example, TouchSmarts are built in a similar design of a laptop. They're more or less like a fat laptop with the screen on the top of it. So anyways, like I say, these all-in-one computers do a good job of saving some space, but they can be a real headache if something goes wrong. Now I'm going to show you what I would almost consider an orphan video classic, but it's not really old enough to be an orphan video classic. It hasn't been on YouTube though. I mean, it hasn't been on YouTube yet. This video is from August of 2010. In some other videos you may have heard me talk about this ordeal. A friend of mine brought me an HP TouchSmart PC that was made in probably 2007, so it was 3 years old. He brought it to me because it wouldn't load Windows properly. Now, normally you would think the hard drive would be an issue if you're getting issues with Windows being corrupted, not wanting to load. But it gets better. The hard drive gets pulled out, and I update the firmware on the Seagate 7211 hard drive. And of course, the hard drive is fine. It runs fine on the Black Max system, and it runs fine on the Mid-Tower Deluxe system. Matter of fact, I did a fresh install to the hard drive for the Mid-Tower Deluxe, and everything worked just fine. But if I tried to format the hard drive in the TouchSmart, usually within the Windows installation, after taking forever to load up, would show that there was no hard drives, no format partitions available. Even though I'd take the hard drive out and plug into Mid-Tower Deluxe and show the partition. And when you go to format the partition, it would supposedly format and then go to install. Well, actually, no, matter of fact, when it went to format, it would give an error message. I even tried updating the BIOS on the computer. That didn't solve it at all. Even when the computer started up, things seemed to be a bit slow when the computer started, even in the BIOS. That was still disabled the SATA controller, then everything ran just fine. So obviously the SATA controller was at fault. It gets better though. I packed the computer back up and I sent it back to its owner. Say, hey, you need to send this to HP because it's got a problem with its motherboard. Of course, being a proprietary computer, I couldn't just go on Newegg.com and buy a replacement ATX motherboard for it. Or, for that matter, a PCI SATA controller. So, he sends the computer off to HP, and of course this guy has an extended warranty. Now I'm going to explain why extended warranties can have a catch. Okay, so HP looks over the computer and says, we cannot fix this. I mean, we'll just have to give you a lump sum for what it's worth. That's all your warranty will cover. And guess how much that lump sum was? About maybe $500, after the guy paid over $1,000 for the computer back in 2007. Now keep in mind, this issue was in 2010, so the computer was 3 years old, and all he could get was $500 back out of it. So there you go, a TouchSmart that lasted 3 years and died. An all-in-one computer lasted 3 years and just quit. And HP only gave him maybe $500 for it. So, like I say, is it really worth saving a little bit of space where that tower would normally sit? I think not. Let's go and watch this video. Hey everybody, here you're looking at an HP TouchSmart PC. This is the IQ804. Recently picked this computer up today from a friend because it had issues with starting Windows. And the message that it displayed on the screen once I picked it up was disk boot failure, press any key to reboot. That kind of message. I mean, with that message you would think, is a hard drive failure? But what gets me is I would restart the computer and then Windows Vista would get halfway started and things would just really run slow. Even the computer would just take forever to post half the time. I mean, just having all sorts of this weird behavior from it. But what gets me was I pulled the hard drive from it earlier today and plugged it up into this computer, the Mid-Tower Deluxe Black Max. It has M-Force 4 chipset on the motherboard, so that gives you an idea what kind of controller it has, running a native IDE. With Windows 7 Professional, I had no problem whatsoever with accessing the drive. I even updated the firmware from HP 24 to HP 26. There's a Seagate Barracuda 7211 500GB hard drive. So the firmware was updated, but the behavior continued with the TouchSmart computer. I even tried to install Windows. I mean, it would just take forever for Windows to even get started. The boot disk, the DVD itself, loaded in, started up, took forever. There'd be a big old long pause of a black screen, and then eventually the user interface would come up to where you could install Windows. But once I got around to installing Windows, what gets me was one time it stated that the disk was unallocated when there were still 2 partitions on it. And I didn't realize that at the time. I went ahead and clicked install Windows. So I tried to go ahead and install the operating system. It shortly came up with a message saying that there was an error trying to start the formatting of the partition. So I pulled the hard drive back out of the computer, and I went ahead and brought it in here, hooked it up to the Mid-Tower Deluxe, my system, which it has also an NVIDIA chipset. I think it's a GeForce 8100 series, something like that. This system's currently down right now because one of the hard drives in it failed. I'm waiting on a replacement to arrive. So what I did is I hooked the hard drive up to this system and inserted the Windows Vista installation DVD into the drive, and things worked flawlessly. No problem whatsoever. Even formatted the drive. It was done installing Windows. I'd say it was, I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It was already into the area where you type in your information, like your name and all kind of stuff. It worked flawlessly. No pauses, no errors about partitioning. And what gets me was when I plugged the drive into this system, the 2 partitions that were originally on the drive showed back up, the HP and the recovery partition. So I went ahead and, like I say, formatted the drive, done an experimental install of Vista. That worked fine. So I took the drive back off this system, already having a feeling that there was something wrong with the computer itself. Put the hard drive back into this system, tried to load Windows again, put the disk in. Same problems. It would just take forever, and eventually it would have once you go around to installing Windows, once it would start formatting the drive, it would show you an error message. And I noticed that this computer would just take forever to post at times. Sometimes it would go fast, sometimes it would go slow. But what gets me is I disabled the SATA controller. Then this computer posted really fast, like there was nothing holding it back. Enable the SATA controller again, the problems come right back. I found a BIOS update on HP's website, but it's of course only for Windows. They don't even give you the option to load in a bootable media and do it from DOS or whatever. Kind of ridiculous. The thing is, I'm really curious. Have any of you guys out there who had these computers had any problems like that out of the system? Like I say, the hard drive is perfectly fine. Don't think it's just because it's a 7200.11 drive. I've tested it, updated the firmware, everything is perfectly fine with the hard drive.